Welcome back. We are now reaching the last session of the cluster on green and circular economy. Last session, but I'm sure we're still going to hear some new ideas and learn a lot because this is the result of the brainstorming discussions which were held since 11:45 on the role of youth to lead the way to a greener future. And the rapporteur who's going to tell us about this discussion is Jeffrey MOXOM. Jeffrey is research coordinator at the International Cooperative Alliance. So he participated in this discussion since this morning. So I will turn to him to hear about the results of the discussion. Simple question to start, Jeffrey. What was the objective of the brainstorming and what are the conclusions you reached?
Great, thank you. Today we brainstormed on themes of cooperatives, young people, environmental transitions. And it was clear that young people are a vital force in contributing to economic and social development. And when we think about climate change, young people will be those most impacted. And although that they are often excluded from the political dialogue, it's great that we see that all over the world, they're beginning to fight back and beginning to make themselves heard. So, during the brainstorming, we focused on fair production and consumption, on environmental awareness, and on the role of the co-op movement in a just and sustainable transition. So we're asking ourselves, what role can cooperatives play and young leaders play in kick-starting this transition? And, the consensus was that we really do need action now. And I think are we the last generation that can end climate change? With a backdrop like this, we should think seriously about all the routes available to us. And we really see a lot of potential today in the brainstorming for new inclusive and sustainable business models and for cooperatives. So whether we look at how co-ops prioritize transparency and they're addressing sustainability in the value chain, the importance of increasing our knowledge on these alternative business models and providing youth with the tools to set them up, or how cooperatives can partner with other actors, those who are working on the fight against climate change, institutions, national governments, also social and environmental movements. I think it was clear that co-ops will become more important in the transition to a greener future because they're member-driven, they're democratic, they're inclusive, they're centered on ownership, and they should and can be at the forefront of our response. And they can also be an excellent tool for youth-led enterprises that promote economic democracy. Thinking about the wider frame and also some environmental links to the COVID-19 pandemic, where co-ops have been, they've provided a collective response, solidarity, community support. They have a huge network, a key point that came out today, and their inherent resilience as an enterprise model shows that they'll be there also in building back better. At the European level, recent UN global Europe regulation, that includes strong recognition of co-ops as actors. So we really welcome this recognition and that cooperatives will play a role in meeting Europe's climate goals. And a final thing I think we picked up on today was the importance of networking, getting more young people involved. And I think all of us should be involved in, creating a fairer economy. Inclusivity, that's a crucial thing in tackling the climate challenge, engaging and involving young people who will be the most impacted. And so we see really that a co-op economy should be at the forefront. Something which is people-owned, something democratic, distributed by design, and not extractive, and one that we should place at the center if we should rise to the challenge on climate.
Thank you, Jeffrey. So networking and partnerships, the role of youth, inclusion, that's very complementary and coherent to some of the conclusions we heard from the previous session. Now we're going to end this session, and after the DDs, we have to implement everything we heard about. So how exactly could these conclusions and your recommendations be put in practice? What's your advice?
That's a great question. I think the first one that came out today is more education and more information on the co-op model. Really important that there's an alternative to business as usual that's actually accessible for young people. The brainstorming showed that there wasn't really enough information on this and a better way to disseminate it, with new information on new and upcoming social media platforms. Again, I think we need to prioritize local economic democracy. So in a globalized world, economic localization, it can bring huge benefits. Co-ops are making a commitment within their values and principles. They're working towards the SDGs. And, they can provide a solution to the different challenges that we face now. If you think about, for example, something that came up was the EU food transition. How do we create fairer and more sustainable value chains? The networks that cooperatives have there are one clear solution. And many essential key services can be provided. If we think about renewable energy, if we think about housing or banking, that can be done efficiently and affordably with the cooperative model and in a way that respects planetary boundaries. So it's really about reviving the logic of cooperation in our economy and our society as it has been in the past. If we think about traditional shareholder businesses, we see the logic of competition. And this creates a race to the bottom in terms of our social and environmental standards. But with cooperation, what we're trying to do is really to raise that bar and to preserve and protect the valuable environmental assets that we have for society and for our future generations. So co-ops are very well suited there because they recognise these social and environmental externalities, and they offer a different way to solve those problems through green local economic democracy. And that deliberation and decision making, putting young people in a position where they have real strategic say on what happens on this issue. Co-ops can act as schools for democracy in this way. They provide a vehicle for participation for the young citizen in the governance of affairs. And in a world where some of us begin to question, the foundations of liberal democracies, where we have a lot of corporate power, we have a locally rooted, a democratic and citizen-led solution here. That can be a real antidote to failures where we've had a lack of action from actors so far on climate. Many of us continue to talk about climate action, but there continues to be billions poured into subsidising extractive industries and environmental destruction. So that's something that came through really clearly today. That young people feel that the business as usual, it can no longer continue. So despite those challenges, I think the brainstorming has also shown really the importance of partnerships. We can work together on this issue. We can be active, in partnering with national governments, with international institutions and civil society, and social and environmental movements, to work together in a whole of society approach for these positive social and environmental outcomes. So we need to work together to solve climate change, an issue that supersedes national borders, and those who are emitting the least are facing the biggest impact. So if I can summarize that, I think we need to think about the role of education, greater education and training on cooperatives, greater inclusive political dialogue, and prioritising local green economic democracy. That's how we can put our conclusions into practice and make sure that a cooperative economy is one that is at the forefront to solve our environmental challenges. So thank you.
Thanks to you, Jeffrey. Thanks for this conclusion on the role of youth and the recommendation to have more partnerships involving young people. That was a great conclusion for your discussion, and I think for the entire cluster on green and circular economy.
Thank you.
Thanks.